John's or yours? At Whitewell. Okay.
Hey everyone, welcome to New Comic Book Day Book Club. I'm the host with the least. My name's Alec, Whitewell Comics. See what I did there? Flipped it around. And that's John. I did it right, sort of.
Yeah, you went the right direction.
And with us for the first time is Chaos and Comics. Welcome.
Oh, thank you guys for having me.
Pleasure to have you.
Anybody wearing a Lion Cat shirt is definitely worth coming on here.
Not only a stand-up guy, but a true legend for coming in at the last second for us.
Yeah. Well, when he said Monstress, I was all for it, so it was an easy choice.
Nice. So hanging out with us is always secondary to the book.
Last week we were discussing Fables with Seawood 19, and at the end we were like, we should do Monstress, and he said I haven't read it either, so we thought, if you're gonna read it, come by next week and we'll check it out. And then his work schedule changed, and we were like, okay, well, we'll just do it ourselves. And then I posted, I said, I know somebody who likes Monstress, somebody who told me that it was a great read, somebody that told me to check in on it. So I asked Chris, and he thankfully had time and he could come in and join us.
TJ says, well, these books aren't cheap in a 9.8. Yeah, look up the second print of issue 1. That book is bananas. And speaking of the chat, unlike the last show we do on Wednesdays, we do shout out the chat on this show. Say what's up to JP's Budget Collecting, who said he still hasn't read it, so he's going to stop by and say hello. Because he says we rock, but he says, well, Alec rocks and John is eh. Backseat Driver is also going to watch it in replay, so maybe we won't have an audience.
I was going to say, a lot of people, I feel like this is one of those books that everybody owns, and not everybody has. Most people haven't taken the time to read it yet.
And JP says it will be on replay for me too, which is sad because I think Alec might actually like this, which means he will only spend about 70% of the show saying bad stuff about it.
What happened? What happened here?
What did happen? Oh, we lost him. He'll be back.
He'll be back.
Discovery Bay Comics in the chat. What's up? Good evening to yourself, sir. Thunderhouse Design is here. And TJ, hello again. And he's back.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. Gore Vidal, appreciate you being here as always. And TJ said, I'm here. That's all you need. And Great Matter Hulk is here. What's up? Thunderhouse hasn't read it yet, but he says you're gonna hang anyway. # live dangerously. That COVID life.
Living on the edge, man.
So much like last week, we read an entire trade, which I'm not used to doing anymore because we've been reading one issue a week. All of a sudden, 6 issues in the first issue. We were just saying before we started is 60 pages. So.
Yeah, for your money, I feel like this is one of the best $9 image trades you can get. Like it's a beast.
Would you say it's monstrous?
Hey,
that's my one joke.
I also feel like it's one of those books that I've talked to so many people who said, I've got it, I want to read it. For whatever reason, it's this book that so many people have purchased or thought about purchasing and have not read. It's kind of weird. And the people that have read it all really love it. Comic Smurf, Chris, Fuchsia Only, some people that I really love in this community shout out how great this is. And it was funny that it is also this notoriously I just haven't gotten around to it yet book.
Yeah, for me, it goes back to that 60-page first issue where it made it feel a little daunting to start. You're like, okay, this is going to be a thick story. And I don't mean thick as in just page count, but thick as in content. And I wasn't wrong. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing, but it's just you have to be ready for that. And, you have to sit down and really ingest it.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a ton in there, and I think one of Takeda's I think I'm naming the artist now. One of Marjorie Liu's strengths too is she's able to frame a lot of setup within the action. Sometimes in a lot of books, you got to make excuses for setup or rising action, right? And this actually has like a ton of it, really. I mean, everyone's still a mystery, essentially, even by the time you end this series. But it's all in the context of like a lot of action, a lot of excitement, and questions posed in sort of the correct way to keep you going.
Yeah, and not a lot of exposition. So
yeah,
there's a cat that talks a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of dialogue, but it's never like, "Hey, do you remember this thing you already know?" It's very much like either characters finding out stuff they don't know already, or people just like speaking like people speak, sort of. I mean, considering the context, but you know what I mean? It's like people are just having conversations about stuff, and you kind of have to fill in some of the blanks or learn it as you go along, which I much prefer in my comics or like anything I ingest.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It seems like a book, and maybe Chris can support having read more of it than we have. It seems like a book that so far at least has, at least this first trade, it feels like it rewards readers who read closely, like spend the time really not skim reading, but like getting into everything that's happening on a given page.
I think that's exactly it. And like I said before we came on, so just when you asked me to get on this, I decided to read it again. So I read it in the last couple of hours. And the first time I think I read it like that, actually, John, what you just said, like it rewards you if you don't skim it. I read it like I would, you know, I normally consider fantasy a little bit lighter reads, even though sometimes it's more wordy. There's not a lot of like, you don't have to explain like planets and technology like you do in sci-fi, right? Like to some extent you got to explain magic, but it's still magic. And I think I did that the first time, where a lot of the characterization is really dense in this. So when I reread Volume 1 the second time was when one of those things where you bought Volume 2 and you're like, I can't remember what happened. It's been a year. So I reread Volume 1. I remember getting a lot more of it. And then even just today, my kid's taking a bath and I'm reading it and I'm finishing it. I should be paying attention to him. And I'm like, oh, there's a ton now. Like this is the third read is actually, and I'm probably going to have to read Volume 2 again. And I think I read Volume 3 on Comixology. I can't remember now, but at least Volume 2 I could read again and I'll probably have the same feeling, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, I will say I'll get my big criticism out of the way so that we can talk about what I liked. Is that the first issue I was like sucked in, and then by the sixth issue I felt myself like, maybe it was just because I was trying to get through it for the show, but like I felt like it got less interesting to me a bit because maybe it was like so dense and it was not really like it was continually bringing up the same questions a little bit for me without, it was giving you like tidbits here and there and like building the world a lot more than I thought it was building the story at points, which is not a terrible thing, but yeah, Corbett says you can't skim Monstress.
Yeah,
it's like reading Gaiman or more. It requires commitment and concentration. Yeah, I mean, I feel like everything is very intentional. There's not really any wasted time, and I'm sure it's. I mean, from page 1, like you get the sense that they know where they're going, which is a big complaint I have with a lot of books where they just write in issue 1 or. They write a pilot for a TV show and they're like, we have this great idea, this nugget of this idea, but we have this show called Lost and we don't know where it's going.
I was going to say Lost. I was going to say it was Lost.
All right, I'm not wrong, John.
Game of Thrones like that too.
Yeah, a lot of shows do that.
So I guess the basics for people who haven't read it, it's a fantasy magic, sorcery kind of storyline involving several warring factions, people with special powers, people without, and people caught in the middle. And the main character is this young girl who is missing an arm, but has sort of some power inside of her that she can't quite understand or control. And everybody from all sides seems to want her. And this first trade is her getting a little glimpse of what it is and what it can do.
Yeah. And it starts by her, you find out pretty quickly, starts by her intentionally getting captured to infiltrate the humans side of this battle in order to kind of get information and assassinate someone who she feels like betrayed her mother. And then while she's in prison there, she gets kind of befriended by this small fox girl who helps her escape. And then they go on the road, even though this evil power that's inside the main character keeps trying to kill the little fox girl.
The Thunderhouse design there has a comment that that I would have clarified too on you getting to the sixth page or the sixth
this one
issue. Yeah. So at least by the sixth issue, what I could tell you without any spoilers at all is that even though that closes up that first arc, it's actually the preface to the next volume.
Right. Yeah. It very much felt like, okay, this is where the story kind of like really starts.
Yeah, it's going to branch out there. So if you finished like issue 5 and you read it all in a day, and like Thunderhouse says, like it's a dense book, I think it can be read in a day. I think any trade could be read in a day, but definitely once you get to issue 6, I mean, I thought I was getting tired today. This is the third time I read it, but I was like doing family stuff and trying to read. I thought that was the reason, but that's definitely a piece of it for sure. So
and like, to clarify, it wouldn't be book club if I didn't have something to dump on. So, but the thing is, like, this does exactly what I say most books need to do, which is give things more room to breathe. Like, there's so many books that this would have been issue 1.
Yeah.
All of this. Yeah.
And that's not an exaggeration. Yeah. Truncated into like 23 pages. I think of like some books we read recently from Image that really had this like vast world and these huge ideas, and they just crunched them down into this tiny little box where.
Yeah, I mean, I just stopped reading Protector, and I gave that one 3 issues, and it didn't have near the world that this one does, the authenticity of world, where you genuinely felt like there are so many layers and places going on beyond what I'm reading on these pages.
Yeah. And so good for it. I will say the only other thing is that I feel like character takes a backseat to story.
Well, I mean, so what I think one of the pieces when you guys were describing it, so character can take a backseat to story, but again, there's a lot of dialogue, so there actually is a decent amount of character building. But one of those reasons is because it's framed. Most of the book is framed as a runaway book, so you can think of films like that, like Apocalypto. You sort of have to get it on the run, essentially. So backseat, I think, is a different story than. I can't say that doesn't take a backseat to it, but from what we said earlier. I mean, what's happening is that you're getting a lot of exposition, and she's doing it well because she's doing it in the context of action. So, I mean, that's why I can't say that, okay, the characterization takes a back seat, but this is like sort of her method of getting a lot of this exposition out that you need,
Yeah. I guess like what I mean more is that she like the character certainly has motivation and certainly has, reasoning and stuff like that, but she, like, I couldn't tell you what her personality was.
Yeah, I mean, she also has memory problems and is only driven by revenge, right? So she's at this point, she's Punisher, right? So she doesn't have like she's a switch right now, on or off, essentially. I mean, in that sense, in this volume. Then maybe it's not that her characterization took a backseat. It's that it's just at this point very, very, very simple.
All right. And not every story has to be focused on character either.
Yeah.
And I've heard people describe like stories have to fall, and I disagree with this fundamental idea, but the idea that stories generally fall into one of those two categories. They're plot driven or they're character driven. And I understand the idea of it. I think the best stories balance both. And there are I agree also with that, what Alex saying about the hero having just kind of one layer at this point. She's really just, that one thing. But the other characters I think have things going on beyond that I think are a little more interesting. And for me, that's the sign that it's not simply just a plot driven story, that there's other things as well.
Yeah. Well, especially the villains in this. And there's a few layers. I think that's probably what this volume does the best, is develop there's like legitimately maybe 4 villains in this.
Yeah. There's so many threats.
Yeah. So, and I guess those are built a little bit more. Some of the politics between the witch queen and then the person that we know for most of it as the Inquisitrix.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're built up pretty well. I mean, as well as you can. They only get so much screen time, right? Because the vast majority of the book is still the runaway, framed as a runaway plot. And then the monster inside her, we learn more and more about her, but that's through conversation. So some of those things are built a little well, but I mean, she definitely is simple. I would say that I mean, to me, this is plot. When I think of plot-driven writers, I mean, I hate to bring up Hickman because I know that's what we're thinking of when there's too much exposition. Warren Ellis is another one, and even the other. Not Alan Moore, that's obvious, but even like Ennis, for example, even though he's a little bit wackier, you could tell like he's trying to make a beginning, middle, and end. In that sense, I don't feel the plot as much as you guys do. I think obviously there is one. I feel that there's a lot of exposition. A lot of and a lot of even though it's developed through conversation stuff, done around this element of action, and just for the simple fact, as far as she travels from issue 1 to issue 6, you know what I mean? She gets all the way to Dusk. I forget if they're called the Dusk People, Initiate, whatever. You know what I mean? She actually travels a ton, and so you get a lot of world building just because she just rolls through a large part of the map at the in the volume. Even.
I think it's funny that you feel like this has a lot of exposition in it. You should read some of the stinkers we've read the last few weeks.
Well, I don't have anything. I have no problem with exposition, especially when you're able to read a full arc. I have no problem with exposition. I like the way that there's a ton of exposition because when you think back, there's almost all world building here. It's framed within the action, is what I'm saying. So it's not like a word. I'm sorry, it's not like just a word dump. You know what I mean?
And it never feels like insulting to the reader either. It's never like outside of the realm of realistic, the way the characters are talking to each other. Because we read some books where it's just like, do you remember this thing that you remember? Let me talk about it for a page and a half.
Yeah. What's the book that you're talking about specifically right now?
Not 9 out of the 10 we've read recently. Like in all honesty, like it is such a horrible trend.
Great. You like Fables, right? Fables is great.
No. We're not talking about. Yeah, definitely talking about the Marvel #1s that we've read over the last year. A lot of Guardians #1s.
Captain Marvel was especially offensive.
Oh God, yeah. That X-Men #1 we read about a year and a half ago was pretty.
Wolverine #1.
Wolverine.
So that came around. I didn't feel so. Those are #1s. Like they're built. Those are #1s of famous IP, right? They're built to be jump on.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say though, Chris mentioned a few times the world building, and for me, I think the star of this trade, and it might just be my reaction, is the art and how that creates the environments that we're visiting. Because I feel like the world is the star. It's less of a plot and character-driven piece, and for me, it's just an environment where you're just sort of soaking in it, and things are happening. And there's times when I fully did not understand what was going on, but I think it was intentional. They did not. I was in being introduced to, like when you met was it a? God, I'm forgetting. Was she like a wolf queen or a dog queen?
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a whole new set of characters that it's out of left field, but I'm thrown in here. And it didn't bother me because I felt like I was in the hands of somebody taking me somewhere that they had my best interests at heart or whatever.
Those are the one spots, like the wolf, especially the fox, where I had the and I don't want everything to go back to Saga. It seems like, that's where this stuff goes lately. But I mean, that's where I felt like, just the design of the character, that like I felt that like Saga feel, like, oh, that's clever. You know what I mean? Like just the design of some of these characters and stuff. So that was the one spot I had that feeling.
Yeah, the art for me was like every page was tremendous, and I knew Santa Takeda did the art, but as I was reading it about 2/3 of the way through, I thought to myself, it's really like the coloring that is what sets it apart. So when I finished, I said, well, I want to see who the colorist was, but she does everything, which is just jaw-dropping.
Yeah. It's also one of the things I'll say in my reviews sometimes is so much art now is done like on an iPad or digitally, right? And I don't mind that. It's the world we live in, right? But I sort of want to be tricked sometimes too.
You don't want it to look digital.
Yeah, and I don't want it to look. I also don't want it to look like off the shelf either. Like a lot. I know we all love Boom, and I love Boom too. But some of the art that people praise, it looks the same. As, yeah, and this is one of the only ones where, and it's not all, but there's clearly like photo referencing, like of the wolf face and stuff like that. I think that woman that's the guard in the first issue, I think that's pretty photo referenced, and it's like a trick that a lot of manga artists use. Yeah. And it's built like a manga too, by the way.
And that's what I was going to say. There's definitely an anime manga kind of quality to it.
A lot of diagonal lines in the panels, and
with the larger sized eyes and the very angular faces and the simple face, not a lot of like detailed lines on the faces. For me, it reminded me a lot of that.
Yeah, and has that feeling. But in some of these pictures, there is, sometimes I'll notice it in a lot of books where, okay, your circles are too perfect. Like, and everything is if you're going to do a design on the floor, every circle is perfect. And she does that here. But you'll see other pieces of, I meant to put a bookmark in this, but you'll see other pieces of this room where, the floor's pattern is clearly a computer made circle or polygon, but the rest, the chandeliers and stuff are clearly drawn by hand, maybe drawn by hand on the iPad, but they're drawn by hand, not using a shape tool or something like that. And she mixes that stuff so perfectly, along with the colors and some photo referencing, like probably more smooth than I've seen anyone do it, especially when you take if you can divide them into those three. And I'm not a trained artist at all. I'm not good at it all either. But it's something, especially the more comics I read, the more and more I've read over the years, something I pay real close attention to. And I don't know someone that does it like this. You know what I mean? It's too detailed for manga, even though it has elements of manga. It's too detailed to be like cut and dry, draw a simple face and no background like we see in a lot of comics today that are praised. It hits every level, and I think it becomes mixed media, but takes every piece of that media and brings it up to the next level, including the coloring, like you said, Alex. So it looks nothing like anything else.
And Gorvidal says Monstress is better than Saga. And I obviously haven't read enough of this to make that judgment. I've had my criticisms of Saga. I will say, though, that I think Santa Takeda is a better artist than Fiona Staples.
Yeah, I can say that. Gore Vidal, me and Gore are on the same side a lot. For example, on Tom King Batman, we got to go into our own little corners for that. One of the only things that we do outright disagree on is he does think Saga is overrated, and we have to let him be wrong sometimes. But with that said, and he's right too. He said this earlier, that Saga is a lot more character driven. But I think we have some of us, we have like 10 volumes of Saga in our head. You know what I mean? And this one, I have 2, maybe 3. I have to like read the third one again to see if I read it. The story hasn't developed quite yet.
Right.
Takeda's definitely more talented and takes more time.
That's what I was going to say. Where I think I've always said this about Fiona Staples. When she takes her time and she puts the work in, her stuff looks amazing. But you can tell like certain pages and certain panels, she just really phones it in. And I don't feel like, at least in this first volume, Santa Takeda doesn't, like every panel she puts the care in.
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't be surprised if all three of us have read this in trade. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these issues had 3 months in between, because there's a ton of detail in it. Like,
sure, but is that worth taking the time to put out a better product?
I think so, especially with that amount of comics being out. It would save me some money. So I'd rather them take longer and make a cooler comic for the money, But
I'd like to talk a little bit about the mythology that they're dealing with here in the story, because we have the humans and we have the ancients, and then we have the idea of the humans being without power, the ancients being sort of immortals with all kinds of power, and then our hero is what they call
arcanic,
and she's in the middle, right, like divided between the two cultures. And then there's other, obviously, species characters and things as well. There was a great breakdown, I think it was at the end of issue 5, that kind of gave me the information that I was like, okay, I really need this now. And it was like right when I needed it, they did the breakdown. What I really like about it is these cultures and the culture clashes and the culture blends seem authentic to me. How do you feel about these cultures? These 3 clearly visible cultures here.
In what regard? And how they're
did it feel like genuine and authentic to you, that you felt like, wow, I could really see the way I could see the interaction between the cultures through history? Like, okay, clearly there's a blend, like you have the arcane. I'm gonna screw that up. The archaics. Arcanics?
Like arcane, so arcanics.
Arcanics.
Now you got me thinking I said it wrong.
I'm sorry. Yeah, but I feel like you can see the crossover of culture, despite the fact that there's this wall, literally and figuratively, dividing these cultures. It just feels genuinely like it lives beyond the pages for me.
So then, what you're saying is you think that maybe not individual characters, but you think that there was actually in this first volume good development between the at least 3 races.
Yeah, like I generally could see culture happening. The culture of these humans that have this hate towards these half-breed characters that are somewhere in the middle. They have this fear of the ancients, and they're building their own sort of arsenal to protect themselves and lead this assault. And then you have on the other side our character, who is sort of stuck in the middle of it all and trying to find their place in it. I felt very strongly that I could see and understand the cultures going on here.
So one of the things between these cultures, this fight that no one could remember, one of the things that reminded me of is like, one time I tried to sit down and I tried to figure out like where the whole Balkan War started, and I realized that I'd been even worse if I had done it like in the Middle East, like Israel and stuff. But you try to go back in history, and like it's almost forgotten. You can never really. I mean, I'm sure each side has who did to who first in 1642 or whatever, or even before that. In the case of Israel and the Arab countries around it. But it gets so deep that no one can remember. And Monstress sort of does that. It's like, especially when that smart cat is talking, it explains to you how like some of these cultures came about. Has real light about their interactions with each other. But then basically, just gives you some mythology that maybe this is the way they started to fight. And it turns out, if I read it correctly, this is the part I was reading quickly, even though I've read it 3 times now, is that the Arcanics are actually a mix between the ancients and the humans, right? But there's enough of them now that we have to consider them a race.
Exactly.
So it'll remain to be seen, because Monstress right now is like on issue 37 or something. Maybe it's 27, but it'll remain to be seen, because technically the Arcanics are the half breeds, for lack of a better phrase. Technically the Arcanics are, but the ancients aren't anywhere. And these two are warring with each other, and they're considered a separate race, even though what they are, they're really just half human.
So yeah, this is the fourth volume of the trades that are out right now.
Nice.
This is through volume 24. So yeah, they've got to be somewhere beyond 24, and yet my LCS didn't have a fifth trade, so I don't think there is a fifth trade yet.
Yeah, that's nice. You got all four.
I want to go back to a comment TJ put in the chat a little while ago. It said a positive review of reviewing my Faith in Comics, and then I started saying some critical stuff. And I just want to point out that even the stuff that I like the best deserves criticism. Like, nothing is without criticism. I don't think even my favorite thing, Strangers in Paradise, Battlestar Galactica, like, I can find things to criticize about those things, because nobody's nerfed. So and I keep preaching on this show that as soon as we kind of stop looking at things objectively and take things at face value and don't kind of demand better, then we'll stop getting things that are better. So I don't think that we should not look at things with a critical eye and not criticize things that we don't like about the stuff, even if it's things that we really like.
I will. I can tell you something that's critical. This is more in function, something I would not have noticed, and I've mentioned it even in a certain context already. But the truth is that the book, it's not even dense. Dense is not the right word, because decorum was dense. East to west is dense. Some old Warren Ellis is dense. So dense is not the word. But there is something, even though I'm in awe and I love it, if you don't, and I don't know what this is, and we could throw it out for conversation, if you don't go right to the next volume, there's something about it that, except that it's good, that doesn't stay with you. And I don't know if there's too, whether the plot is strong or not. I don't know if there's too many plot points, but this is the third time I've read it, and I'm not I didn't learn to read yesterday, and I've been reading comics my whole life, but this is one of them where, and I know a lot of them do this, you wait for the trade and volume 2 comes out, you're not sure if you remember it. But I mean, this is the third time now that I've read it in 2 years. And, I don't know if it's a good thing. I feel like I've seen some things new, or if it's a bad thing that, I forgot about some of this, or that it didn't feel important enough,
I love that.
The really one thing that stayed with me is that I loved it.
I love that you said it doesn't feel like it's dense, because I do think dense is the wrong word here, because it doesn't feel like it's just this complicated Rubik's Cube thing going on here. Instead, it feels like it's just, the difference is it's not slowing down to tell you what's going on, which requires more focus and more effort from you. But the plot itself and is fairly simplistic. The issues that the hero is going through are very classic hero character things. But the world is just not slowing down to explain itself. And in that way, I could totally understand what you're saying, is that it's not a dense read, but it's not also going to feed it to you, Yeah,
it's something you have to pay attention to, though.
Yeah, that's probably true. It doesn't slow down. So what's another similar series that doesn't really slow down, or at least in the first volume? And if I've read it, I can see if that was one where I was like, oh man.
I felt that way reading 100 Bullets, that it wasn't going to take patience with you, that it was like, it was going to just tell a story, and it's a very simplistic story overall. But then that story ends and a whole new story begins, and you're left trying to figure out how this all pieces together and what's really going on. And they're just going to breadcrumb that for you for the run. And I liked the way they did that, especially those early I don't know, 10 trades or whatever it was, 8 trades of 100 bullets, where I just was really enjoying the patience that Azzarello and Rizzo had that they were using in that run. I just felt like they were not, that it was a very simple story and idea, but under it were all these things in motion, these cogs and wheels moving that you could sense, but you didn't understand. And at the same time, you just had to go with it. It was the ride was so enjoyable. You know?
Sandman.
So I was going to say Sandman, and then I was also going to say this, but so I think that lines up for me. That lines up with the I should have reread it, but I think that's because by its nature it's more ephemeral. So Sandman's in this pile too, but I don't know if you guys read Odyssey. This is by Matt Fraction, and it's by Matt Fraction, so it's really beautiful. It's by Matt Fraction and art by Christian Ward. And then Sandman, of course. But I think so. Those have both of those have a more like ephemeral feel, you know. Sure, so same feeling where I'm like, what did I just read? I enjoyed it a lot. What do I remember? But that was because like, you know, Morpheus is like walking through a wall and then he's in like a colorful plate. You know what I mean? The way John, so a mixture between what I said, the way John described it, and 100 Bullets might be this, that just keeps going quick, you know. Is I don't think that anything here was very like ephemeral like Sandman, right? Like it just moved along, like what you said originally, Alec, that it didn't, and what you said too, John, that it didn't really give you a chance to think, and that might be what it is. Like it rewarded close reading. Maybe I didn't read it very closely the first 2 times, you know, but Sandman and Odyssey definitely have a similar feeling where I was like, what just that was awesome. What just happened? You know, with Sandman being much better than Odyssey, but Odyssey still being pretty good and weird.
Corvidal throwing out the Strange Bullets reference recommendation. Yeah. Great book for sure.
Yeah.
Everything that Lapham's do, or I'm okay with. Okay in my book. So yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoyed this, which I don't say very often on the show. So,
so are you still reading? Are you buying the issues or the trades, Chris?
I was buying the trades, but it's one of those where I either grabbed. I couldn't find 3. Now I'm like really curious because I know it got far. It was one that I knew, you know, I had to pay attention to because I had already read it twice, right? And this is where it really knocks it out of the park, in my opinion, is number 2.
Okay.
Perhaps number 3, but number 2 is where I realized that, oh, this is big. Like a lot of crazy stuff's happening, and it's a great writer and great artist doing it. I wanted to mention something about Marjorie Liu also, about plot and her and knowing where she's going. But this is where I was like, oh, there's something bigger going on, which happens a lot in a good series, right? It's like, you know, that's why I think it's so easy for me to call this one exposition, you know, because, you know, stuff starts getting really built here.
Gotcha.
And hopefully in 3. The thing I want to say about Marjorie Liu, and I think it'd be maybe fun to compare her to Charles Soule, since they're both attorneys, and they both actually Charles Soule I've read the whole way through, you know, Darth Vader. I've read most of his Daredevil run, which unfortunately people are forgetting because Darsky's is so good, but I think that they like that mindset, and I work with lawyers. That mindset is so, their job is to be so detailed, essentially, you know, detailed, not in the way I need to be, like with math, but detailed with like what you're saying. Like you're never going to get something by them if they're a good lawyer, you know? And so when they sit and write something out, you know, I think they know the ending and even know a lot of the beats in the middle, a lot better than another great writer like Kieran Gillen, for example, who knows the ending all the time also, but he'll stray a little bit in between, a little bit more than I think Charles Soule or Liu will do. And I wonder if you guys noticed that. This is my first Marjorie Liu book. I didn't read any of the X-Men stuff. I didn't read any of her other stuff.
I've never read anything by her.
Which is why I can stay with Undiscovered Country, by the way, even though I don't know what the hell's going on, because I know they're going somewhere, and then I also trust Scott Snyder a little more. I know by the time I get to issue 25 that I'll have, you know, a lot of cool stuff will happen is what I'm trying to say, and I get something similar from her, in a pure fantasy setting, manga influenced fantasy setting, so I wonder even if in volume 1 you've seen some of that, and I think you sort of did because you saw it. Alec already said she seems to know where she's going with it, but
yeah, I mean, I felt that right off the bat. I felt like both of them. I just felt like they knew the world, they were comfortable in the world, which is like shocking when you're first starting a story like that to feel that somebody completely understands the realm where this is taking place. They're comfortable in it, and the story felt like they knew where they were going. They were not in a rush to get there, and they were not going to slow down at the same time to tell us what was going on. It was just, here it is. This is how it's playing out. Just get ready. And that was very comforting and enjoyable, but also it kept, with 2 kids running around and all the crazy. I'm just like, how do I really focus in on this? Because it demanded that.
Definitely.
I keep dropping the link in the chat for Chris's channel. If you haven't seen Chris before, his channel's right there. I think you're really getting close to, are you almost at 500 now? What are you at?
I'm in like the mid 4s. I guess I am almost at 500.
Let's get him there. That's awesome.
Everyone's getting subs these days because no one's doing anything but watching Netflix and YouTube.
Yeah, but no one's getting notifications. So.
Yeah, so thanks, YouTube.
Yeah, I think it's StreamYard, by the way. I think it's StreamYard.
So we could definitely get Chris closer to 500. He's definitely worth it. And yeah, somehow I just resubbed you a second ago. I don't know. I thought I was subbed you, but I guess not.
I find that all the time where I'm sure I've subbed to this person because I watch their content, and then I go to their channel. I'm like, wait a minute. So I don't know. And I will say though that I'm getting notifications for people when they do live premieres. I'm getting a ton of notifications for that. It's just the live shows, the streams like this that are harder to get the notifications for. So just keep an eye out on Instagram for that. But like when Perry does a video drop, I'm getting like 10 notifications for that.
That comes in. I think though, if you go, the people that go live through YouTube, I think those notifications are coming through.
Oh, okay. So maybe it's the stream.
I've just sort of like noticed it, but it's very anecdotal at this point. So if we all try to look at it, and then we can
conspiracy.
Yeah, or maybe StreamYard. Maybe they all went home and they're maybe it's StreamYard that's letting bots run everything.
Well, I did hear that that YouTube sent a bunch of their people to work from home, and that it's harder for them to do the notifications the same way. I don't know.
Yeah.
So normally we ask if we're going to pick up the next issue. John already has, and I know, Chris, you already have read it. So that leaves me. I mean, yeah, I'm definitely interested to see where it's going. So I would like to at least, check it out from the library or something if libraries ever open again.
There's one other thing. It won't be that much discussion, but something too with Monstress gets this because it's been around. I discovered it late, and then you guys are reading it now, so it's been around a long time. One of the things that is negative about comics and sort of the monthly thing, and especially the last 15 or more years love affair with first issues, is that even if you really like something, it often doesn't end or has to be wrapped up too quickly because of sales. And that's one of the reasons why it's easier for me to jump on something like Hickman or Charles Soule and Scott Snyder, because I know that they're gonna get to where they need. If I get bored on the way, that's fine, but it won't because it gets canceled. And Monstress is sort of the same way. They're up to like issue 30 or something, so you're gonna get a lot of the story. It's won a ton of awards, and that's something more practical. It's not like built into the story or the arc. It's built in just to the nature of the medium. And that's a big deal to me. I'm reading a book called Sonata by a writer who I can't even remember, and I love it. And we're on issue 8 or 9. I'm surprised we're there, and I'm just waiting for it to get canceled every month because no one talks about it, no one cares about it, and it seems to be around somehow still. The art could be better. There's a lot to criticize about it, but I enjoyed it enough to keep buying it. But I'm just waiting for it to get canceled. You know what I mean?
Holy cow!
Wow!
Mega super chat from Matt. I hope that wasn't a mistake. If it is, let me know. I'll refund you. But big $50 super chat from Boyard7. That's like matches every super chat I've ever gotten. So
That's
thank you.
Okay. Matt.
That's all John's Harry Potter work there.
But yes, we still need to do a Harry Potter chat one of these days since I finally have read it.
Yeah. We're trying to get Thanatos involved. We may just need to walk off on that one and just let the sunset set. Let's keep going. By the way, as a reminder for book, Alec and I said at the beginning when we started doing book club that super chats on these shows are going to be donated. So that's a very nice donation by you.
For sure. Yep.
Thank you very much.
If I ever get a check from Google, I will be donating to charity.
I think you're getting one now. I think the limit's 35, isn't it? Is that what someone told me?
The first one you need to get $100.
Oh, okay.
So thank you very much. The future literacy of this country appreciates your generosity.
Can I just ask one quick question here at the end since we're kind of wrapping up? You mentioned, Chris, earlier that this is a series that you understand that there must be breaks between issues and things like that, where they're clearly putting in a massive amount of work to get it to the place where it's published and ready. Unlike a book like Batman that's coming out every 2 weeks or what have you. Is this it reminds me of when like US television was sort of transitioning into British television, where a TV show would drop and then it's like 2 years later and then maybe they do another season of it. Is this the like future of indie comics, that it's kind of be in this form where, yeah, we ran a storyline for Die and it'll be another year and we'll do another one?
I think so for Monstress, I should preface that I don't know that it did. I'm just saying It's so detailed. It's so detailed. I wouldn't be surprised if there were bigger breaks between issues. Die is at least quitting between an arc and they're just taking a rest. You know what I mean? And Once in Future only took 1 month, Yeah,
I was gonna say Once in Future and Something's Killing the Children took a month, but that was it. They were right back ready to go.
Yeah, I think that's better. To point what Alec said is that there's such pressure to get your stuff out. And, and that's important, as we find from people that are successful at social media and stuff, like they just put out a lot of stuff, even if they're repeating themselves, and it's important, but to measure quality, it's better if they wait, and some of these classics that we remember, like Love and Rockets and stuff, like those would have huge breaks. It'd just be whenever they felt like it. You know what I mean? And Love and Rockets doesn't have quite the detail of this art wise, but the old Image books too, as corny as a lot of them were, they were actually extremely detailed, and a lot of detail in the cover and the color and stuff too, mixed with the fact that those guys were all superstars and drinking and doing drugs and stuff. You know what I mean? It made it should have been a 4-month wait. It was like 8 or 9 month wait sometimes. Yeah. So I don't mind waiting, because the other side of it is that even as people that get on YouTube and talk about these comics and stuff, we're shelling out a lot of money. And sometimes it's, to be honest, I read so many comics sometimes in a week, it's hard to retain it. I would I'd like to have the breaks would be a little bit better, or, if they staggered a little more,
Sorry.
Is it the future? It should be, that's for sure. If we're going to get a better piece of work on, it should be. To be honest, the superhero comics are made to be monthly. They're that's modern pulp. The fact that there's the things that you guys were complaining about, it's fine, because to me it's modern pulp. But to me, the honest truth is that this should just, most of these Image books should be released like this, because so a lot of them are unreadable in issue 1. And
that's how they make their money anyway.
Yeah,
you mentioned books that wait a long time. Another one to me that really is a standout for that is Optic Nerve, where Adrian Tomine waited years to put out another issue at some point, and luckily that was pretty much an anthology book, so every story you weren't waiting for the continuation of the story, but he certainly waited until he was ready to tell a story that he wanted to tell.
So Optic Nerve, I actually bought. My channel name has a different name at the time, but I actually bought on your recommendation. So it was one of those I knew I should have read for a long time, and then you were talking about it one day, so I went and bought it all.
And you read it now?
I read, so also the nice thing about Optic Nerve, you don't have to necessarily have to read them like 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I found a lot, and I think I got like 9 of them, and I'm missing like, issue 1 and issue 7. I'm missing something in the middle. So I haven't read them all, but yeah, they're wonderful. Especially when you read about what he was doing, if you can go in raw and you're like, oh, it feels like getting an indie comp of whatever music you like or something,
Exactly.
Good pieces or weird pieces, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what's really going on, especially the short story nature of it. Then you start reading about what he was saying, or also that there's such huge fans of it, what fans were saying, and you get a lot more of it. There's me and Gore Vidal, if he's still in there, a few days ago on either his channel or mine, we're talking about the Decalogue, which is a 10 short stories based supposedly on the 10 Commandments. It's by a Polish director, and it sort of reminds me of that a little bit. That's what came to my mind when I started saying that. Is like they're so loosely related to the 10 Commandments that you realize something cool is going on, like I do with Optic Nerve. But then, when you start getting to the community or the people that like it, the film lovers, the comic lovers and stuff, it starts to give you a lot more even. And when you reread it, it gives it rereadability actually, because when you reread it's even more fulfilling, So
definitely.
There's my Optic Nerve review.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for me, unless you guys have anything else you want to add about the book.
No, that's perfect.
All right. Well, thank you as always, John. Thank you to Chris, Chaos of Comics. Follow him up on all your socials and your YouTubes. Thanks again to Matt with that super chat that's still counting down. It's not going to make it to the end of the episode, but super generous. And we will definitely schedule our Harry Potter chat sometime, and check out Comic Stories tomorrow night, which will be on Matt's channel, correct? Even though we'll have a different host?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I thought so. Great. Check out Comic Stories tomorrow.
I think it's at 7:30 Eastern.
Eastern time, yes. And make sure you have notifications on, but, keep your eyes peeled on your YouTube app at 7:30 Eastern, since, as we just discussed, it might not notify you. So thanks everyone in the chat for hanging out. Thanks to Monstress for giving us a good book this week to read. And next week, we're not sure what we're doing yet, because there's probably not going to be comics again. Definitely not. So we got to figure out what we want to read. If anyone has anything they really are dying to talk about, hit us up on the IGs. Otherwise, we'll just BS like we usually do. So until next week, never turn your back on the ocean. Have a great night. Stay safe.